Hafide. Inanhu si Michaeluhan Bavacqua. My name is Michaeluhan Bavacqua. I'm the curator at the Guam Museum, and my apologies that I'm not there to join all of you at this conference, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak a little bit about the history of the Marianas Islands, Guam, and the CNMI, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and also to a little bit to the theme of this panel, talking about museums in militarized spaces. So Guam and the Marianas Islands have, as I like to say, the dubious distinction of being one of the earliest places in the Pacific to be colonized by European powers, and also one of the last places in the Pacific to be decolonized, where the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas Islands is a Commonwealth under the United States, which is still a semi-territorial status. Guam remains a unincorporated territory, or per the United Nations definition, a non-self-governing territory, a place that exists in the world today in a political status that is not genuinely self-governing and therefore is in need of decolonizing and moving to a state where it is able to effectively, genuinely self-govern. And so the history of the Chamorro people is one in which Spanish colonization comes earlier than other places in the Pacific. And then the United States comes in at the early 20th century, both of which having a dramatic effect on the people, their culture, their land, the language, and so on. And so the Chamorro people today in the Marianas they exist in a place in which they and others who live in the Marianas Islands are connected to the United States, but also not connected. I usually like to say that they are a part of the United States, but exist apart from the United States. Some people will call this foreign in a domestic sense, and it refers to the territories of the United States, places like Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, the CNMI, the US Virgin Islands, where they are clearly connected to the United States. They are part of its empire, but they are not full and equal. Neither are they independent, right? So that they have these relationships to the United States, which are unilaterally defined. They are not partnerships, regardless of any sort of rhetoric that comes out from either side, whether from the United States or the people in the territories, but they are relationships that are defined solely by the colonizer, who gets to determine how included these places are, how excluded these places are, and so on. And so that is part of the existence of those of us in the Marianas Islands. And so even though the CNMI has a slightly different status, they are a Commonwealth. They do have certain rights as outlined in their covenant that people in Guam do not have. But fundamentally, Guam and the CNMI have no representation within international fora, but also no representation within Washington, D.C., within the government of the United States. And so because of this, we remain sort of effectively non-self-governing. And so what is that? What does it mean to be sort of the remnants, the footnotes to sort of the American empire? And what does it mean then to work in institutions like museums, in which you are responsible for stimulating conversations, in which you are responsible for the memory of a community, holding on to treasured artifacts? What is your role in terms of either challenging that or maintaining that? And so the museum itself is a place which undergoes an evolution, perhaps, in the past century in the Marianas Islands. Speaking as the curator of the Guam Museum, I can tell you that when the museum is first started in Guam, more than 90 years ago, its genesis is driven primarily by sort of a feeling that Chamorros, as an indigenous people in a modern context, are going to disappear from the world. So you have to grab things that represent them before they disappear so you can put them on display. And these were Chamorros who were feeling this too, who were arguing that they needed a museum because who knows what's going to happen to the people. So we got to have something so that we can show our children, our grandchildren, who they used to be, or who we used to be. And so the museum, in that sense, from a place which holds on to things and is tied to communities that are long past, or sort of captures the remnants, the artifacts, the echoes that preserves them. To today, what I love about working at the Guam Museum is that the Guam Museum today is not about sort of representing the Chamorro of long past or sort of lamenting the loss of the Chamorro. It is about the Chamorro as a living thing, and that the museum lives and breathes and grows alongside the community. And so the question though remains, what is the role of the museum in relation to the larger issues that our islands and our communities face? And so what is the role of a museum in a colonized space? What can the museum do in terms of pushing for decolonization, in terms of attacking systems of life, systems of governance, which may have come in via colonization and which sort of may fundamentally disempower and perform disservice for the people who use them because they come in as part of that colonial legacy. And so how can you take places like museums, which may have colonial origins, and can you decolonize them? Can you transform them in a way that they can serve the community rather than serve the gaze of whoever brought them in originally? This brings me then to sort of the other issue, which the Marianas, probably more than any place in the United States and its territories, can represent, and that is sort of militarization and American militarization. Is that Guam, for example, is 29% US military facilities. So out of around 212 square miles, 29% of that are US military bases, Air Force, Navy, National Guard, and now Marine Corps bases. And the amount of the amount of US bases and federal control in the islands used to be substantially larger. And so that Guam and the Marianas, our relationship to the United States has been defined for more than a century by our strategic value to the United States. The service that we can provide, as what some military planners have called about Guam, have referred to Guam as the tip of America's spear, like an American fortress, Fortress Guam, an unsinkable aircraft carrier. The US military provides so many nicknames for Guam and the Marianas in terms of the strategic value it provides, being on the edge of Asia, distant from the United States proper, but also then a place in which there is no sovereign foreign government. And so this is part of the value to the United States of places like Guam, is that military commanders say this without any sense of irony. They're happy to say this part out loud, is that Guam's value, the Marianas value, is its location, but also that there are no government infrastructure. There is no government which can interfere should America wish to act in a certain way. Should America wish to increase its presence? Should America wish to decrease its presence? Should America wish to train, to do this or that in Guam and around the waters, around the Marianas? Nobody can stop it. And so this value is something that has evolved at times from Guam as a coaling station for the United States when it was first taken, to a massive critical base in terms of providing a buffer against rising communist forces in Asia and the Cold War, to what one US security analyst said, that one day the United States should be able to govern the world by just using Guam and Diego Garcia to project force across the rest of the nations. And so as museums, we are not immune from this. The history of the Guam Museum itself, the collections that have been taken out of Guam, the collections that exist in Guam of Chamorro artifacts and ancestral remains, are heavily driven by the military activities, military construction, military interests. And so for those of us who work in this region, part of working in museums is also then responding to this fact that the bases, sort of the displacement of things, creates artifacts, which we then are responsible for, which we then have to take care of. But in the larger conversation though, Guam and the Marianas are a place in which the US military has its own sort of playground, as they refer to it. The largest training zone in the world is in the Marianas for the US military. The largest peacetime exercises in the world happen here in the Marianas Islands, and the US invites other nations to come and bring their navies and their air forces to train alongside the United States. And so this is a question, and it is not just a question for us in the Marianas, because militarization is a key part of American life in general. But the purpose of colonies, the purpose of territories, is that they often hold. They get to hold the things, they get to warehouse the things that the empire itself does not want to acknowledge and does not want to admit to. And so one of the things that others can learn by looking at places such as Guam and the Marianas is that the militarization that we experience every day, that we live with, comes from the United States, and it is a reflection of that. And so by understanding Guam and the Marianas, you can learn key things which the United States does not want to admit about itself. Si dus masi tatlu, please enjoy your conference.